Hey, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Mission Matters. My name is Adam Torres, and if you'd like to apply to be a guest on the show, just head on over to missionmatters.com and click on Be Our Guest to apply. All right, so today my guest is Christian Faes, and he's founder and CEO over at Faes & Company, and this particular interview is part of our Milken Global Conference coverage series where we bring on participants and attendees who are at the Milken Global Conference, and they, tell us about their experience and any projects and things they're working on as well. So first thing first, Christian, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you very much, Adam. I appreciate you having me on.
So I know we didn't catch each other in person, but I just got to ask, so you were at the Milken Conference. Is this a first-time experience, or have you been in the past?
Yes, I was. No, it's my second time, actually. So I think it's an absolutely brilliant conference. So I feel incredibly fortunate to have been there. I was there again this year. Yeah, and just thoroughly enjoyed it. I think it's a very unique conference in terms of the group of people they're able to bring together. And it seems like everyone, in my experience, is very happy to converse and meet and exchange ideas and collaborate and form new connections. Yeah. So, yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it.
What keeps you coming back? I know there's a lot of conferences, a lot of things you do with your time in general. What keeps you coming back and putting this on your calendar?
I mean, I think for me, there's no other conference that attracts the caliber of speakers that are there. So I think that's incredibly, interesting, although you can watch it online. There's other ways to perhaps access some of that content. But being in the room while they're doing those presentations and panels is a great experience. And then also, just the people you meet in the audience there, over lunch and the various sort of fringe events that go on as part of the conference. I just think it's a great experience. And, I live in LA now, so it's a very accessible conference, and it kind of feels like it's one that's hard not to be at.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's like my Super Bowl every year. I'm like, once that comes up in early May or whatever the roundabout it is, I'm there. It's all good the whole week. And as soon as they announce it, I love it. Well,
the Super Bowl is a good way to put it. Yeah.
That's the way I think of it. I go to a lot of conferences. I haven't had any conference organizers that complain about it yet. They're like, how come Milken's the Super Bowl? I don't know why. Step it up. No, I'm just well, let's switching topics slightly. No, before I'm not booked in the future. No, that being said, so let's talk a little bit more about what you're doing. So you're in LA. Tell us about Faes & Co.
Yeah, so I guess talk a little bit about my background, just sort of intro myself. So I'm a lawyer from Australia. You may be able to tell from my accent, but I spent a long time in the UK, spent 15 years building a scaled non-bank mortgage lender in that market, a business called LendInvest, which is now the largest non-bank mortgage lender or one of the largest in the UK market. Spent 15 years building that through to IPO, and then I've always wanted to build something in the US and been fascinated by the US market. And so moved here 3 years ago with the view of kind of trying to do it again, although LendInvest was a VC-backed kind of technology-driven business. Today, we're very much focused on being really just a finance business. I say just, we're very technology-enabled, but we're certainly not focused on building technology now. We're just focused on being principally a finance business. And our mission for our firm is to provide investors with consistent, stable, asset-backed returns. And we do that through a very interesting asset class that we're involved with, which is real estate bridging finance.
We'll go a little bit more into the model, like maybe how you even came about, like when you're talking about coming to the U.S. market, doing something else and focusing your attention, obviously based on your history and background, a lot of things you could have did. Why settle on this? Like what was the thing that said, like, this is the opportunity?
This is the opportunity. Well, I think it's a fascinating asset class. And when I first got involved in it, it was around the time of the financial crisis. So I originally moved to the UK and could see that with everything that was going on at the time with the crisis, banks were retreating from the market. And I think that's something that continues today. Even post the crisis, that's something that has continued to be the case, where banks are dealing with still legacy issues, increased regulation, capital requirements, and all the rest of it. So they're less actively lending in certain parts of the market. And that has really sort of, I guess, birthed the whole sort of private credit movement where originators are able to go into different niche areas of the market, or perceived niche. They're not necessarily, they're sort of big opportunities, but areas of the market where banks would previously have been lending but are now less active. And filling that void are these originators, these private credit funds, and they're giving that opportunity to investors to get access to it and to earn a yield. So for us, we're specifically in real estate bridging finance, which you talk about niche sort of areas. I mean, certainly that is perceived as being one, but it's a super interesting area of the market, and we're effectively lending to what we describe as property entrepreneurs. So you can think of someone who's very actively buying and selling real estate in their patch. They know their local area very well. They know the agents. They know the market. They know what the end buyer wants. They're buying typically the worst house on a nice street, replacing the bathrooms and kitchen, and then they're going to sell on that property for a profit. And so we provide finance to those borrowers, and it's a pretty conservative asset class as well. So we take a first lien against the property. We're quite focused on residential property, so it's a pretty liquid asset class, although obviously in recent years with interest rates coming up, it's an interesting market, but it's a sound asset-backed security that we're lending against. And through that, we're able to offer investors a pretty decent return. And so on the investor side, our fund, we market it to accredited investors, to RIAs and self-directed IRAs and so on. And we pay a fixed coupon. So for investors that invest, currently it's 9.5%. It's a fixed return, paid quarterly. It only has a 1-year lock-in and 90-day liquidity to the fund. So it's a pretty simple product for the investors, and underlying is a pretty plain vanilla sort of, asset backed against houses at a pretty conservative LTV. So sort of a simple product as well on the asset side.
Talk to me about how you make you mentioned LTV, talk to me about how you make the investment decisions on who you're going to lend to. You said seasoned housepreneurs, I believe you said was the way you worded it, but individuals that have been in the business for a while. Give us a little bit of a flavor for what goes into those investment decisions.
Yeah, it's a really good question, because I think sometimes the perception is when I talk about this is a market where perhaps I don't think banks have particularly served this market very well ever, because they're just not set up to move very quickly and tech enablement for what these specific borrowers want. But the perception is that we perhaps take shortcuts, or we're able to charge a higher rate because they're impaired borrowers. But that's not the case. So typically our borrowers will be quite creditworthy. So we'll be FICO scoring and looking at the sort of creditworthiness of the borrower. They're always corporate entities. So they're property professionals. They're actively doing this. They'll typically do sort of maybe 5 to 10 transactions a year. We'll be able to verify their track record. We can pull title and sort of, verify everything that they've done in the past. And we want to back entrepreneurs that are making money. They're actively buying and selling, but, they're doing this in a commercially viable way. And to be their preferred funding provider. We'll get an independent, and then, the key part of it all is really the asset as well. So we'll be looking at the value of the asset, what they're buying it for, and we'll get an independent appraisal in every case. So someone will go into the property, they'll take photos, they'll do a sort of thoughtful report on what the property is worth. And so basically we do everything that a bank would do when they're lending to someone, but just through technology and being a more sort of nimble, less bureaucratic organization as our firm, we're able to lend to these borrowers in a really sort of streamlined, quick way and provide really something that is a unique funding solution for all these entrepreneurs.
Talk to me about geography. Any areas that you're following? Is this countrywide or specifically any particular areas?
Yeah, it's another good question. So we're active in 15 states across the US. Our key focus markets are California, Texas, and Florida. And when we're choosing a market to be active in, there's a number of factors that we look at. One of the core ones is the liquidity of the market. Property is very local, right? So there's certain markets that do better than others and certain markets that have more net migration to it, or, there's certain demographic factors that mean that there's just more liquidity in that market. So we like those markets. So in a worst case scenario, we're worried about, can we sell this property? If everything goes wrong, can we sell the property? How long is it going to take us to do that? And we also focus on what are called non-judicial foreclosure states. So states where, again, things do go wrong, we're able to take possession of the property and recover our investors' capital in a pretty streamlined way. The only exception to that is Florida, which is a judicial state, but it's pretty pro-business and the foreclosure process moves pretty swiftly in that state. So that's our focus. We don't feel that we need to be nationwide. We just want to be very selective and make sure we're finding the best opportunities really for our investors to be investing in.
You mentioned earlier single family, or you might have said homes or houses. I just want to clarify. So are you doing across real estate? Is it commercial only? Is it single family also? Or give us a flavor for the portfolio.
Yeah, so it's predominantly single family residential. I think we're about 75 plus on SFR, single family residential. We do a little bit of multifamily. We do some mixed use. We can do commercial, but coming back to that liquidity factor, it's very difficult for us to sort of get comfortable with liquidity unless it's a very, very low LTV and very experienced borrower. And also it's a very granular portfolio. So we're not lending against, we're certainly not large commercial buildings because we're not really doing commercial, but not large houses either. So they're not kind of the typical house in Bel Air or kind of like, the glamorous houses you might sort of see in magazines and so on. Our average loan size is about $500,000. So it's not kind of quite middle America, but it's also not high-end properties. And again, that's trying to focus on sort of the area of the market where we think there's good quality borrowers, good quality assets, and also principally liquidity if things do go wrong.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, Christian, this has been a lot of fun getting to know you and learning more about your company and your investment thesis and also the fund. But that being said, if somebody's listening or watching this and they want to follow up and they want to learn more, how do they do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So please just go to our website. It's Faes Invest, FAESINVEST.com. And my email address is christian@faesinvest.com. I'd be happy to answer any questions, talk to anyone, in more detail about things or introduce them to our team and, get them familiar with what we're doing. And so I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you today, Adam.
Perfect. And for everybody listening, just so you know, we'll definitely put links in the show notes so that you can just click on them and head right on over and check out what Christian's up to. And speaking to the audience, if this is your first time with Mission Matters and you haven't done it yet, hit that subscribe or follow button. This is a daily show. Each and every day I'm bringing you new content, new ideas, and hopefully new inspiration to help you along the way on your journey as well. So again, hit that subscribe or follow button. And Christian, thanks again for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks, Adam.